I am pregnant with my boss's child, so I'll take over him as well. The mistress of my husband, Peter, Katie, had been constant in her taunting, showing off her youth, and attempting to establish her power over me. She had even succeeded in taking over my position as the president's secretary, and now her eyes were set on Peter. Something inside me snapped at that moment, and I decided to stop hiding. I made up my mind to bring them both down because I wanted justice to be served. I got a nice settlement when Peter and I decided to get a divorce. Peter and Katie showed off their newfound happiness with an extraordinary wedding in Italy shortly after our divorce. Katie called me in a panic a week after they were married. "Peter is still not home," she cried in desperation. Her voice revealed uncertainty and dread. I couldn't help but laugh darkly at her sorrow. "You should know his location," she said. I pondered sharing the truth for a brief while, savoring the strength of what I knew. Katie's outraged voice confirmed what I sensed all along, that my scheme to reveal Peter's fraud had been successful, leaving them both to suffer the fallout. I'm Natalie. As a 58-year-old working housewife, I got up earlier than my husband Peter to make breakfast at 6 a.m. I took great satisfaction in making sure Peter's office was spotless every morning before he arrived at 8 a.m. as the president's secretary at his company. "I'm grateful, Natalie. You did the cleaning again today," Peter said as he came into his office. I fixed his tie while grinning. "Obviously, my dear." I kindly replied, "I want you to work in a clean environment." Peter and I were married for 30 years, having been connected by mutual friends. We didn't have kids, but we had created a loving life together. After assuming control of the company from his father-in-law, Peter led it to success as president. I told him, "Johnson confirmed the funding for your new business plan. That's very good news. John appears to think highly of your negotiating abilities," Peter said appreciatively. "Talking of which, what about the other company plan Johnson funded earlier?" I noticed Peter's faint displeasure when I asked suddenly. "I have it under control." "Don't worry," Peter replied. "All right then, nothing exceptional on today's schedule?" I asked for confirmation. Peter said, "Certainly nothing out of the routine," as he turned his attention to the day ahead. Peter grinned happily. "Excellent. Next, Natalie, I would like to present you to someone." "Please wait for me. I'll bring her here," he offered kindly. I couldn't shake a developing anxiety when I heard laughter coming from the corridor, a combination of a younger woman's upbeat tone and Peter's deep voice. Peter stepped inside the office, his look thrilled as the door slid open. However, my gaze became engrossed in the girl standing next to him. She was quite young, with long, perfectly styled hair, and she wore a top that showed off her chest and a miniskirt that showed off her thighs. Her clothes looked more appropriate for a night on the town, yet she wore them with a confidence that surprised me and highlighted how young she looked. "This is Katie, and she will be working with us from now on," Peter said with a smile. I was in disbelief. Was this a joke of any kind? It was already disturbing that my husband was presenting a young woman to me in this way. Furthermore, we didn't usually hire recent graduates. "Excuse me, just how old is Katie?" Trying not to lose my cool, I managed to inquire. "She is 23 years old. We clicked right away when we first met at a bar with pals." "Don't you believe she has a youthful energy and is young?" "It will raise employee spirits," Peter excitedly said. Katie's assured presence and my husband's glowing grin left me at a loss for words. With a decisive and quick tone, Peter had urged, "Then, Natalie, please teach Katie the ropes." "So Katie will be a general employee, correct?" "Oh, I forgot to mention that we'll have 2 secretaries moving forward, so please teach Katie the secretary duties." 2 secretaries? Is that really required?" I asked, attempting to maintain a steady tone. Peter said, "Well, work must be getting hard for you," with a light laugh that broke my heart. "It's all right if there is someone else to work along. It hurt the way he said it. Thereafter, be careful, he continued, dismissing the subject. I have a little personal errand to run. I'm depending on you to mentor her. Peter then left Katie and me in the president's office by ourselves. Peter's exit instantly filled the air with an odd combination of tension and curiosity. I had the new task of training Katie, the new face in the office. She seemed excited, but maybe a little unaware of the dynamics at play. I took a deep breath and made an effort to center myself. Peter tended to act on impulse and frequently made decisions without fully understanding the outcomes. His impatience had previously resulted in many unfortunate circumstances. I had come to terms with it during our marriage. At moments like these, words are worthless, so I'll just follow his instructions for the time being. Either way, it's not going to work out. Hey, Natalie, Katie replied, lightly putting her hand on mine. Yes? I turned to look at her and calmly replied. With wide eyes, she inquired, How old are you? Since she had posed such a straightforward question, I felt it only right to answer, so I told her the truth. I'll be 58 this year. I was expecting an understanding or respectful response, but Katie surprised me with her response. Her face took on a mix of mild amazement and sympathy. What? You are my grandmother's age. You work even though you could die at any moment, poor thing. That is rather depressing. The words hurt, but I managed to reply. Katie, I said, carefully selecting my words. Age is just a number, there's nothing to be sad about it. In our field of work, experience and commitment are more important. Those who have been here for a while have a lot to teach you. My coolness started to fade as Katie's remarks went deeper. It was disgusting how disrespectful she was. With every word she spoke after that, my expression became more tense. With a tone full of arrogance, she said, I see the sad one is the boss. He is constantly with an elderly woman, whether at work or home. Such an awful thing. What precisely are you trying to say? Suppressed rage made my voice shake a little as I demanded. She said, pretending to be innocent, you don't get it? I guess when you get older, your brain starts to slow down. Katie exhaled deeply and spoke in a confident voice, saying, I am younger and more attractive than you, an elderly woman. You know what I mean? I trembled in a mixture of shock and rage at her smug, satisfied smile. I was unable to remain silent any longer. You know, you need to develop some common sense. Did I, enrage you? Or is this menopause? She asked jokingly. What did you witness to get someone that enraged so quickly? If you're unhappy about stuff like this, it must be difficult to work consistently. In addition, you sweat a lot and experience breathlessness during menopause, right? It is awkward to put up such effort. Perhaps it's time to call it quits. Katie chuckled and said, Why don't you quit as the president's wife as well? As I stood there in shock. Her remarks lingered in the atmosphere like a toxic mist. I dreaded to think that this was the person who wanted to steal Peter from me. I had no choice but to speak up. It's time to stop. I can't teach you anything with that kind of intention. Leave the company immediately. I was prepared for a fight, but Katie gave me a tearful gaze instead. I apologize. I made a joke because I just wanted to be friends with you, Natalie, but it was too much. Too much. Katie sobbed like a tragic heroine before collapsing to the ground. I'm going to quit this business. I am very grateful for everything you have done. Katie rushed from the room. What's taking place? I was stunned by a sudden shift of circumstances and remained there in shock till Katie came back, Peter looking red in the face. What are you doing? I shuddered at his impulsive voice. What's happened, dear? I asked, attempting to maintain a steady tone. Katie told me you yelled at her. I tried to explain. It's because she said something terrible. Stop lying! I've been observing your discussion. Katie had captured the conflict on her smartphone. The recording began as soon as I scolded Katie, giving the impression that I did it out of the blue and caused her to cry. she cried and apologized so deeply because of this. Frustrated, I bit my lip. Everything turned so much against me. "You're not understanding, Peter." She spoke rudely and uttered offensive things. "Enough, Natalie." He cut me off. "I've seen enough." Katie continued to cry, and Peter appeared to become increasingly angry. Knowing how skillfully Katie had handled the matter made me feel sick to my stomach. Peter said in a disappointed tone, "She was simply attempting to learn from you, and you treated her so harshly. Whoever's words are more believable is obvious. As of right now, a secretary who harasses staff members is fired." It was unbelievable to me. Peter was ready to leave me for Katie, who had recently started working for the company, even though I had always helped him out at home and at work. "Wait, then who will do the secretary's job?" "Katie will do it. It's decided," he said. "It's not possible," I objected. "And what about you?" The words that had almost escaped me were swallowed. I made another attempt that only Peter and I could comprehend. "You know about your hobby." "I'll take care of that myself," he cut in arrogantly. "I like cute and innocent Katie better than you, the liar. In addition, I think I suit a young, attractive girl like her better than you do." With a happy narrowing of his eyes, Peter turned to face Katie. She gave him a loving glance and grinned brilliantly. She turned to face me then and gave me a slight tongue out. I repeatedly voiced my objections to Peter, but he was unresponsive. I persisted. "Being a secretary is not an easy job. Katie is unable to handle it." "That sounds overly dramatic," he remarked snidely. "You won't know until you try." He must believe that he is now a knight defending his princess. His ignorance astounded me. It was hardly what you would anticipate from someone in charge of a business. Peter eventually cleared my desk of all of my personal belongings. Rather, he set up Katie with a brand new workstation and adorable kid-friendly stationery. It was all for nothing. When I realized this, I chose to quit the company rather than waste any more time or effort. But Peter never did return home that evening. He also didn't pick up when I called. I initially assumed it was just his method of getting even with me. But after a week, a month, and eventually 3 months, I began to feel worried. Peter unexpectedly called me into the company one day. I had a flash of hope as I made my way to the president's office. Perhaps now he realized just how difficult the secretary's work was. Maybe he'd decided to give Katie a break and give me a call back. With a glimmer of hope, I knocked on the president's office door. Peter's voice called, "Come in." I was greeted with an incredible scene as soon as I opened the door. Katie was standing next to Peter, who was grinning broadly and holding hands. They both turned to face me and burst out laughing. "Natalie, it's been a long time." With excitement shining in his eyes, Peter declared, "We have some big news today." "What is it?" With a barely steady voice, I asked. "Actually, Peter opened his mouth, but Katie covered it with her hand. "Allow me to state it." She said, "I would like to thank the wife." And Peter gave a profound nod. Katie smiled broadly and turned to face me. "We are going to get married. I appreciate all that you have done for Peter." I stared at them, not understanding what I was hearing, my heart thumping. Peter looked at me trembling and laughed shyly. "There's no need to conceal it. I'm considering beginning a second life. You have become too old. Living peacefully by oneself is better for you." "What? Is that your way of daring?" It seemed as though my body had run out of blood. "Relax a moment, Natalie. The conversation isn't finished yet," Peter stated, attempting to seem calm. "A gift is presented here. For you, I created a copy." Katie gave me a couple of paper sheets. Photos in black and white were printed on them. I felt nauseous when I saw them. "This ultrasound. Don't tell me." Katie leaned closer, murmured in my ear, nodded slowly, and softly rubbed her belly. "I am pregnant with Peter's child," she said. "As the president's wife, I will assume the role." As her words took hold, the room appeared to spin. My entire existence, Everything I had fought for was being taken from me. The whole thing had been betrayed, and now I knew more than ever how bad things really were. It made my blood boil how Katie had made fun of me, showed off how young she was, and attempted to be the best at everything. She even succeeded me in my role as president's secretary, and now her sights were set on Peter. I wouldn't hold back anymore, though. I would see to it that they both went to the bottom of the pit. I decided to grant Peter and Katie their ideal union. Peter handed me the divorce papers, which I signed to guarantee a large settlement. In Italy, they celebrated their victory with an elaborate wedding. After a week, things were different. Katie had called me. "Hey, Peter is still not home. You must be aware of his whereabouts as his ex-wife, right?" Katie sounded desperate. As I had anticipated, I laughed viciously. "I didn't say anything, but Peter has a favorite activity," I remarked, savoring the tense tone in her voice. "He's probably in Vegas right now." "Vegas?" Katie was clearly confused. "Have you ever heard of it? In Las Vegas, there's this enormous hotel that has a casino. Every time Peter has the chance, he always runs there." Katie gave a gasp. "Does that mean—" "Yes," I said again, my voice brimming with contentment. "Peter is probably indulging in gambling right now." There was sweet satisfaction in the quiet on the other end. As Katie realized how serious her condition was, I could only picture her shock and sorrow. Though she had assumed victory, all she had gained was a man who was severely addicted. Peter's time had been carefully planned by me to keep him from being overly engrossed in his harmful habits. It seems that his preferences were not disclosed to the new secretary. He spent the money he made on gambling because he didn't want to reveal his darker side. I laughed a little, and Katie stayed silent, as if stunned. "Really, I appreciate you. It appears that Peter was invited by a new business partner to start gambling in the last few years. Peter did have some affection left in him before you arrived." "I was afraid he was going to fall farther, but I've cut him off completely," I continued. "There could not have been a greater occasion to have such a poor individual taken off my hands and even given me some settlement. I can live my second life peacefully because of you." I relished the occasion and laughed heartily. Over the phone, I could hear Katie breathing heavily, her tone filled with annoyance. "Don't you try to joke about this," she shot back. I hung up on Katie, sarcastically saying, "Getting all great and mighty, then goodbye," disregarding her yelling from the other end. The doorbell rang a few days later when I was lounging in my new condo. Might there be a delivery? Nothing had been ordered by me. With suspicion, I peered through the spy hole and noticed my ex-husband, Peter, looking furious with a red face. "Natalie, you're there, right? How dare you disclose the gambling to Katie?" Peter's tone was harsh and demanding. Given the circumstances, I chose to open the door for Peter. He would only follow me again if I ran away. It was best to resolve the matter here. Before I opened the door, I hastily put together a neat file of paperwork. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" As he walked in, I smiled elegantly to welcome him. "What do you mean that a long time has passed? How can you still be smiling after you destroyed my family?" Peter was yelling and attempting to scare me because he was so angry. However, with a woman who had been his wife for a long time, such strategies were ineffective. "Oh my, what's causing your red face? What took place?" I laughed, trying not to lose my cool. "It's none of your business." Clearly agitated, Peter finally snapped. I could see right through him. He had come here to let out his frustration. I was fully aware of what had happened between him and Katie. I nudged him further. "You must have had a fight with your wife. Katie must be upset that you spend the majority of your money on gaming. You're on an allowance now that she promised to handle the finances, correct?" Peter froze, startled. How are you aware of that? Did you disturb us in any way?" With a sudden seriousness, he asked. Although Peter's remarks hurt, I remained calm and didn't allow them to get to me. I was so angry at his conceit and betrayal on the inside. I could see the confusion in his eyes as he stood in front of me, tightening his hands in agitation. What's wrong with investing the money I earned in my interests? With a hint of defensiveness in his voice, Peter questioned. You must have repeated the same with Katie, leading to an argument, and now you're taking it out on me. He was staring at me, a mix of disbelief and uncertainty taking the place of his rage for a moment. I gave a disinterested eyebrow rise. Don't ignore a 30-year wife, Peter, I told as I noticed his irate expression. As your secretary, I oversaw your schedule. You need to be grateful. I cut down on your gaming time to keep you from going bankrupt. Can a 23-year-old who is naive accomplish that? You really don't have an option except to let her try. After all, you're a parent. Peter's face lit up with a visible triumph at the mention of the child. Yes, I am expecting a kid with Katie. She can bear me an heir, not you, who is sterile. He looked down on me and said, You lost as a woman. That's great for you, I said neutrally, not displaying any signs of hurt. We're content. Don't try to destroy my family once more. With a hardening face, Peter pointed accusingly at me. I came here to warn you today. I cocked a head, perplexed. I will spoil your marriage? I don't intend to do that. Actually, I'm considering helping you. Peter was puzzled and obviously lost. What do you mean helping me? Did you go with Katie to the gynecologist? I inquired. That place is for women. Katie said she wanted to go herself, so I didn't join her. Are you sure you saw the ultrasound photo? The thick, glossy photo paper? No, Peter hesitantly answered. The one I saw was just thin, regular paper. I assumed so, I quietly remarked. I selected several pictures out of a clear file and showed them to Peter. These were grainy black and white pictures taken during a baby's ultrasound. Peter's gaze expanded. What? You're expecting a child? I gave a head shake. No, Peter. Katie gave it to me as a gift. She's really ready, isn't she? I gave him a piece of paper that was a 2-year-old blog post printout. Compare this image with the previous one. Have you noticed anything? Peter paused, glancing between the article and the pictures. His face paled slowly as he recognized the falsehood. I held my ground and dealt the last blow to Peter, who was on the ground in shock. I showed him the undeniable match, glowing against the light, by holding up the duplicate ultrasound picture next to the article. Do you know about image search? Despite my racing heart due to the seriousness of the situation, I asked quietly. It's a feature that looks up photographs on the internet that like yours. Using it, I discovered this blog. After copying the essay verbatim, she must have carefully clipped out the photo. As the realization dawned on Peter, his face lost all color. That is untrue, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the violent emotions surging inside of me. There's no one in her belly. Peter mumbled, No, that can't be, his expression showing astonishment. She wouldn't tell lies about that kind of thing. Not possible. He started pounding his hands on the ground in an attempt to smash out his uncertainty and agony at being betrayed. Amidst my anguish for him, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. It's unfortunate, I said, unable to contain my sour smile. You were unable to become a father. It's unlikely that you could have fathered a child given your age. It was naive to believe that a youthful relationship would ensure a child. Get the truth from Katie. Now I'll give her a call. Peter was too tired to continue the argument. Falling silently, he struggled to rebuild the broken illusions of his love. Shortly after I called Katie to the condo, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and turned to face Katie. She seemed confused at first, but then worried when she saw Peter kneeling, defeated and broken behind me. What are you trying to do? Stealing my Peter? Katie's statement filled the space as she rushed inside. I didn't say anything, but Peter's reply was composed and unwavering. He got up gently, keeping Katie in his line of sight. The pregnancy is a lie, isn't it, Katie? Peter spoke with a steady voice that pierced through the tension like a knife. Katie's expression twisted in disbelief and dismay. "Hey, honey, what are you talking about? It is, of course, real. I displayed the ultrasound image to you," she begged, her voice cracking with desperation. "Our child is real." Peter didn't seem to care. "Tell me the truth, Katie." With tears rolling down her cheeks, Katie reclined on the ground. She appeared momentarily lost, trapped between upholding her appearance and acknowledging the reality. Then, all of a sudden, her attitude changed, and she shot a fierce glare up at me. "You must have poisoned his mind with these weird thoughts," Katie said in a mocking tone. "You're just envious because you're old, and I'm young and attractive." I couldn't help but laugh at her attempt to deflect. "Is that all you have to say?" I shot back, a tone marked with incredulity. "Hey, Peter, let's just go home, okay?" Katie tried to pull Peter closer her by reaching out and grabbing his arm. But Peter retreated from her hold, his face taking on a determined hardness. "No, Katie," Peter firmly stated. "I need the truth." With a contorted expression of agony, Peter pushed the ultrasound picture and the blog post copy towards Katie. "The truth cannot be avoided at this point. I had faith in you. How could you tell a lie about such a thing?" His voice broke as he replied, "I was so happy I cried." Katie's countenance changed, her once confident face suddenly lacking it. "Hey, Peter." Peter gave me a tearful, pitying expression, but I said nothing. Katie went on, her voice faltering. "I only wanted to see how much you loved me. I thought I was being taken advantage of. I declared my pregnancy for that reason." Peter's shocked eyes became larger. "You lied because you were afraid?" Katie nodded, her voice growing louder as she steadied herself in the trickery. "You're correct. We may now begin the process of becoming parents. With your intelligence and my attractiveness, it will be a fantastic child who grows up to be president and make a lot of money." I was unable to remain silent any longer. As I stated, "That's not going to happen." I snapped Peter and Katie out of their fantasy world. Katie shot me a scowl, clearly annoyed. "Hey, we're having a moment here." I calmly met her eyes. "Do you truly believe that this man has money?" Katie shot back, her confidence faltering a little. "Obviously, he's a president after all." I groaned, realizing that I had to tell it like it was. "It's true that our business has been handed down through the years and is doing well, but it speaks to the business as a whole. This man enjoys gambling. Do you know what that implies?" Katie's expression paled as the weight of my words finally hit her. She held on to Peter, desperate for comfort, but he said nothing, his humiliation and remorse evident. "What do you mean?" Katie questioned, her voice wavering. I inhaled deeply, knowing that this would shatter her hopes. "Peter gambles with the majority of his own income. You have no idea the amount of debt he has, not because of his leadership, but rather because of the employees' dedication. The organization is stable." Katie's expression changed from confusion to rage. "You have more money than you know what to do with it, so you told me we'd live a wealthy life once we were married." Peter answered, stuttering in his voice. "It's all right. I lost a little money on the slots, but we're about to launch a new company. It will be our huge opportunity." "What are you discussing?" I said something in response. I have no doubt that no new business endeavor is in the works. Katie's eyes grew wide with a mixture of guilt and comprehension. "You recently received funding from Johnson, correct? Now, where is that money? It certainly wasn't used to buy a new wife an engagement ring and high-end brands." "I had my suspicions," I said in a firm and unwavering voice. "You've been claiming that Johnson is helping you launch new businesses, but none of them ever take off. Just one fresh endeavor following another. It was strange to be doubtful, so I talked to Johnson to get reliable information. You joined forces to oppose me? The cash John transferred later that day was a trick, right?" Peter struggled to find words, and his voice quivered. Indeed, a trick. This time, you moved the business funds straight into your personal bank account. Usually, you take greater care and use multiple accounts to stay under the radar. How did you go? That insecure about money, attempting to convince Katie that you're well off. When Peter knew his deception was revealed, his face became white. Stop speaking. It has to do with family. Most likely, probation will be the only outcome. In addition, John will save me. He told himself, even if I'm charged, I'll be out in no time. But his voice was hollow. Why are you aware of everything? It was intended that you be fired. This has nothing to do with you. Peter became even more perplexed. Johnson told me, I quietly retorted. John did. Peter's shocked eyes became larger. Yes, that is me. I was hired by Johnson. Astonished, Peter opened his mouth, but he was at a loss for words. Johnson and I have been working together to uncover your schemes, I said. He couldn't stand by and watch you ruin the company with your gambling. Calmly, I clarified. Johnson got in touch with me right away after learning that you had dumped me. He requested if he might rehire me after expressing regret for your horrible deeds. I immediately responded, yes. Peter's expression twisted with rage. Is John hiding it from me? That idiot! I am appreciative of Johnson. I'm making more money than I was before he gave me the responsibility of managing the schedule, I said, grinning broadly, observing as Peter clenched his teeth. That John, I'll confront him right now. Katie took Peter by the arm just as he was ready to walk away. With unexpected force, she drew him to her, their faces coming close to contact. Her face was a devil's. Hey, you lied to me, she growled in a voice that was surprisingly quiet. Peter looked surprised. Huh? You flaunted your wealth, but in reality, you're just an old criminal, shouted Katie, taking a big breath. Do not mistreat me. I apologize, Katie, Peter murmured, trying to appease her despite his fear. Taking her hand, he met her gaze. Nevertheless, it's all right. Most likely I'll get probation and be allowed to go back home. If we're together, even if I am fired from the job, we can still be content without money. Katie spat, throwing off Peter's hand and gazing at him as if he were vermin. Don't joke with me, she said. A stunning young lady like myself could never coexist with an elderly, impoverished man like you. Oh, what a waste of time when I lied about being pregnant to get us married. The worst possible. Katie then pushed Peter out of the way and ran from the room. Slumping to the ground, Peter felt helpless as his entire world collapsed around him. Now that the truth had finally reached him, he was left to deal with the fallout from his actions on his own. Katie, hold on to me, Katie! Desperately, Peter called out, Shut up! As she slammed the door behind her, Katie yelled. Peter stood at the doorway like a ghost, deserted by his new bride. I said sternly to him, Please go, I live here. But can't we just start afresh, Natalie? Like previously, with me as president and you as secretary? Peter attempted to enchant me with a cheeky grin. It's not realistic. I dislike you. I firmly said, I never want to see your face again. Peter began to shake and his eyes grew wide. Enough of that. I pulled him outside and opened the door. I went back to watching TV and locked the door behind me. When Peter finally realized it was all over, he quietly exited the condo. Peter was later taken into custody. He was transferred to a chilly detention cell alone himself after mistakenly believing that Johnson would save him. Peter was taken into custody for embezzling money that Johnson had given to him. In addition, he had disclosed to associates and suppliers that he was launching new businesses, requesting loans, and transferring the money to his personal account for non-business purposes. Peter will be behind bars for a number of years after receiving a sentence without probation. Katie, meantime, was under investigation when it was thought that she and Peter were plotting. Even though there was no proof of a conspiracy, the police did find that she had been stealing money from different businessmen. She went up to handsome-looking men in clubs, asked them to be her boyfriends, and then said to need the money for a parent's surgery or to get pregnant. In essence, Katie's con games also affected Peter. Katie was taken into custody by the police after she was arrested for fraud. Peter was arrested 6 months ago. I kept working with Johnson in an attempt to repair the company's reputation following the scandal. It wasn't simple, and Johnson was anxious all the time. I wanted to help him in any way I could because I felt so grateful for him. One evening, when he and Johnson were back in the company, he fell back in his chair and let out a long breath. What a long day it has been. A number of business dinners were held. Johnson grinned as he met my eyes. Well, but we had a great dinner because of your excellent restaurant selection, Natalie. Since many of the patrons are about my age, they valued the selection yet healthy dining experience. Besides, none of them was aware of the location today. With sincere appreciation, I said, "Thank you." Johnson grinned softly. Johnson, in contrast to Peter, never loses his composure. His genuine nature is apparent, and he consistently employs kind words when conversing with others. Johnson has a charming personality, in my opinion. I said, "It's too kind of you to say," in gratitude. Johnson let out a happy sigh. To believe Peter's wife was someone as nice as you, genuinely unexpected. I gave a small laugh. Ex-partner. I'm no longer in contact with him. Huh, right. A glimmer of humor twinkled in Johnson's eyes. Natalie, by the way, how long are you planning to work? Do you not consider retiring to your house and leading a quiet life? I love my work, I smiled in response. I want to continue working for as long as I am physically able. Johnson gave a cheerful nod. I'm glad to hear that. Your commitment is admirable. The more the evening went on, the more satisfied I became. I had discovered a place where I was appreciated and valued despite all the chaos in the past. Working with Johnson was about constructing a future of honesty and respect for one another, not just about restoring the business. And that was a goal that was really worthwhile pursuing.